So before I start the class, I'm just curious. Does anyone have any avodah that they did, that they've been doing, that they could tell us about, that they want to talk about? Like I usually start with the avodah that I've been doing in the week, and I'm wondering if anyone did anything with what we've been learning. Feel free to open up your mic and you could bring it up to talk about it. Because you know that I could definitely give you a couple of that I did, but I guess I'm the only one doing avodah with myself. How do you say, how I'm severely flawed because I'm the only one that has avodah that's been, that I have to do. I guess everyone around me is perfect. Okay, anyone? If no, I'm starting. I'll start with me as usual. Okay, so I know that we spoke about the concept of resisting the people around us and resisting our parents or people around us or our friends, our spouses, like living in a kind of resisting way, which is also like having objection to things that are happening, and I'm gonna come up with what it is, or to be in opposition or defiance, and we call it hitnagdut. And it's basically a defiance and objection, and we oppose the reality around us or the people around us. Now, the reason we're trying not to be in resistance, in other words, to be against, to be like, to object, to be in defiance. The reason we're trying to not be in this kind of hitnagdut, in this kind of like resistance, is because we define ourselves through what we're not and not through who we are. And that's why the most severe and also the most prevalent type of resistance is to our parents. Basically, it's saying, my parents did X, Y, Z. I'm going to do the opposite. I don't want to do the same. And then I live my life basically in defiance of my parents, objecting to my parents, resisting who my parents were and what they tried to give me. Now, it means that then we're basing ourselves on nothingness, on what we're not and what we are. And it's something that I try to work on very hard, because as a child growing up in my parents' home, there were things that I looked at and I saw my mother doing. In particular, it was my mother. It was between me and my mother. And I would tell myself, I'm not going to do the same thing of what my mother did. I looked at her with a very critical eyes, and I said, I'm not doing what she did. I want to do it differently. Now, part of what I've been working on, I'm going to give two examples of what I said about my mother that I want to do differently. But part of what I've been working on is my mother, who I speak to her every other day or something like that. She sometimes, in the conversations, I have a feeling of that resistance and objection and opposition or even defiance coming up in me. And I try to function from a place that's not a hitnagdut, that's not defiance. So let's say as I was growing up, one of the things I would say to myself is that when I have guests in my house, let's say when my mother had guests, so it was a big burden for her, and she would talk about the burden of how hard it is and what does she have to do it and whatever. And I said to myself, when I don't want to ever talk about it. I don't want to ever, see it as a burden. If I ever have guests, I want to do it happily. That was one thing. And the other thing is that I'm just giving two things of the many things that I had a lot of hitnagdut towards my mother. And the other thing is the way I said I was going to raise my children was going to be different from my mother and my father. What was it? It was very much like, let's say when my brothers wouldn't go to shul, they would pour water on them. They would want to sleep later. And they would needed to go to yeshiva or to shul. My parents would pour water on them. We'll take the covers off. Like there would be a lot of fights about religious issues. And I said, no, I don't want to raise my kids in that way. I want to raise them, in a more talking about it in a pleasanter way. But I definitely had that hitnagdut that I looked at my mother and I said, I'm never doing that. I'm never doing that. Now, what we've been trying to do in the avodah that we've spoken about is we need to realize that the reason our parents did it, there is a deep there's a deep idea that goes into what our parents were trying to tell us. And I don't want us to look on the surface. My mother hit me, my mother poured water on me, my mother complained, my mother this, my mother that. That's looking at the surface of the issue. We try to get to another level of to see what is the idea my mother was trying to give me underneath. And I remember like a couple of weeks ago, I gave an example of a woman that was doing avodah with me. And she said, my mother always, she gave out food to all my siblings. I was always the one that was last. And then I asked her, what do you think your mother was trying to tell you with that? So you could tell yourself two things. You could tell yourself, my mother hates me. And that really doesn't exist, because anyone that has children knows that their mother could never hate them, but that the mother is trying to teach something that maybe she's doing it in a way that's hard to digest, but there's an idea behind it. But when we spoke about it, she said, my mother thought that I had the resilience to delay gratification, that I could wait. And she gave me less because maybe she thought that I needed to learn that, or maybe she thought that I could handle it. So there's an idea behind the fact that her mother was trying to always gave her food last. Like out of the 9 children, she always got less, even though she wasn't the oldest or the youngest. She was in the middle, but she got less. So the idea, not the surface of what was happening with the mother, the idea was that she had to inculcate in herself is her mother was trying to teach her the importance of delayed gratification. Right. So since I've come to this realization that I don't want to live my life in a resisting way, in a opposition way, in a defiant way, like I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do different. So I decided that I was going to try to figure out, whenever I speak to my mother, what is her idea? What is the message she's trying to give me? And today was the perfect time for me to do it. And I have to say that at the beginning, when my mother started speaking about her, when my mother was speaking in her usual way, I felt like a knot in my stomach and a little bit of a resistance in my stomach, and a defiance in my stomach. And then immediately when I said, Michal, what is your mother trying to teach you? What is your mother's Torah? You need to go with that. So what was she asking me? She asked one of my daughters who does not keep Torah and mitzvot. She asked me, about her religious status. Is she keeping mitzvot? What is she teaching her children? What am I doing about it? Right? She was asking me all these questions. And then she also called up about Shlomo to ask, how old is he? Because she doesn't remember 100%. Is he going out? What are you doing about it? How could you not do anything about it? Like, what's happening with your son? Don't you care about him? Don't you want him to get married? That's what my mother was telling me. So in the olden days, I would think to myself, oh, I never want to speak like her. And I don't, it's, if she wants to know, let her talk to Shlomo. Why is she coming to me? She wants to know about my daughter's religious status. Let her, like, I had all these resisting kind of sentences go in my head. But this time I said, your mother is trying to teach you something. She's trying to teach you a deep and like visceral kind of Torah that I need to take into my life. And one of the things, like with Shlomo, when she's asking me, is he getting married or whatever, she's trying to tell me that marriage and having a family and not being alone is like the most important thing that needs to happen in a person's life. Because through the marriage and bringing children, you create a togetherness, you create more life, you create, challenges around you, that there's someone else that you could take these challenges and do it with. In other words, she's saying full growth can only happen when you have a partner and when you are when you have a partner and you have someone to like rub against. It's like when you try to sharpen a knife, you have a piece of metal and you have the knife, and then you sharpen the knife. It's like you become more of a more of a person that could utilize himself. So that's one thing that my mother was trying to tell me with my son. And let's say about my daughter who's not yet keeping Torah and mitzvot. What is the idea that she's trying to tell me? She's not trying to call up and tell me you did a lousy job in raising your daughter and you better do something about it now. She was trying to say that when you keep the Torah, when you keep the mitzvot, it will enrich your family, your children, and from that, there will be a lot of happiness that will come into your life. So it reminded me of just this past weekend. Ralph and I decided that every Shabbat we'll invite someone from our building, because what I realized living in this building that has 30 families is that we never get to see each other. Like I walk out of my apartment, I go into the elevator, I go down, and I go into my car and I don't see anyone. And the only way I could see anyone is if I get myself a dog and go out walking at 6 o'clock in the morning, my dog, and I don't want to get a dog and I don't want to walk a dog, but many people have dogs that they walk around here. I see a lot of bonding happening through dogs. I said, we'll invite, each family will just invite a different Shabbat. And that way we'll get to meet the people in the building. And we invited a kalkelan, which is a person who deals in like how an economist. His name is, and he's married to like a high-powered lawyer, and they're like 65 years old. And I really enjoy talking to them. And she let me in on the fact that every Friday she goes to her 2 grandchildren. She has 2 grandchildren. She has a son and a daughter. The daughter is 38, not married. The son has 2 children. And she watches her children Friday, because Friday is a day that people we don't have schools and gans and whatever. So I asked her, does she mind doing it? Because I know like my daughter asked me to watch her child every Monday. And I said, no, I can't do it. I'm not doing anything on an ongoing basis. Like if you need help, if whatever, I'll be there. But I'm not committing on a weekly basis for anything. So I asked her, does it bother you? She goes, bother me? I feel like when I raised my children, I put my career first, and I totally missed out on their childhood. And I don't want to miss out on my grandchildren's childhood. I feel like I'm making it up. And she said, but unfortunately, my son is taking the path that I took. And him and his wife are jumping full force into their career, and they don't get to see their children. She said, and I made this mistake of, putting my career before the family, and it really got me to a very high point, but have nothing to do with my money, and I just know that I missed out on my children's younger years. So my mother is trying to tell me, so she was saying she realized at the age of 65 that family is the most important, and that's where she wished she would have put her energies. My mother was telling me that Torah is the most important thing, especially when you're bringing up your family. And when you do that, you will have a richer, more fulfilled life. So when my mother was talking, instead of defending myself, like, Ima, it's her life, she's going to be whatever she's going to do, Shlomo is going to find someone, he's not interested in hearing from me, he has a lot of things, I don't know why he's not getting married, I don't know why he doesn't want to go out with the woman that I want to send him up with. Like, instead of like just going on and on, I decided that I was going to tell my mother, Ima, it sounds like you believe that getting married is the most important thing in the world, and he will only be a whole person once he's like. And I tried to bring the ideas that she was saying, the inner ideas, the visceral ideas, rather than staying on the surface level. So this was my avodah this week, and it was trying to deal with my mother without the resistance that I usually have, trying to get to her Torah, trying to get to the ideas that are behind the surface of what she's saying. And that is a very big wisdom for us as women to do, to get behind the actions of our parents and even behind the words of our parents, to try to grab on to the ideas that are fundamental for our family. We were born in this family in order to get these ideas, in order to get this Torah. Okay, now I'm starting with the Dvar Torah, and the Dvar Torah is going to very much connect with the class that I'm giving. The class that I want to give, and the topic of the class, is that it's a very Kabbalistic term, but it's called, there's no reality in this world. What we think of as reality doesn't exist. And I'm gonna say the Dvar Torah, and then we're gonna flow straight into that idea. So this week's parasha, we learn that Am Yisrael is in Egypt. The Jewish people, they're in Egypt, and there's a new king that did not know Yosef. He didn't know of all the the contribution that Yosef did to Egypt. So the rabbi says some he didn't want to know, some he really didn't know, was the whole dynasty over there. And he was looking at Bnei Israel, and he actually calls them a nation. It's the first time they're called a nation. And he's saying, you know what, these people is all, good and well, but I'm scared that, and he looked at them out of fear. They're becoming like a big nation, and I'm scared that they're going to like undercut me, or they're going to, try to create a revolution or something. And his idea was to torment them. To torment them means to put them to work, to give them very little time to think and very little time to do anything but work, and put them down in this way. And the pasuk in the Torah says, the more that they oppressed the Jews, the more the Jews came forth, and they had many more children, and they multiplied even more with the suffering that the Egyptian gave us. Now, I wanted to talk about the issue of suffering in this world. So here we see that the more they were tortured, the more they thrived. They thrived means that they multiplied. Now, the ability, this is a fact of life. Our ability to expand, to burst forth, our ability to grow and have opportunities to grow, they come with something that we consider as suffering. Why do I say that we consider as suffering? Because I think we tend to think that we go through life, and when things are good, some people are just scared that, things are going to get bad and they can't last too long, and the goodness can't last for too long. And people also think that when suffering comes into our life, it's as if there's been a glitch in the program and the suffering came in, and we need to get rid of the suffering. And then our good and happy life could continue, and we could enjoy and then we could continue on enjoying our life. However, what we don't understand is that the difficulty and hardship and the nisyonot, I'd say in English, they're called not only challenges, but guys, how do you say nisyonot in English? Anyone could help me out?
Trials.
Tests. Great. Trials or tests. Thank you. That the trials and the tests that we have in our lives, they're actually built and woven into the fabric of this world. And not only are they woven into the fabric of this world and into our existence, they're woven into the fabric of our very life. We're given suffering in order to get out of our comfort zone and to get to the next level. In other words, the suffering is rooted in me. It's not that I have a great life and a problem came and now I'm suffering. No, suffering is part of the fabric of our lives that was put in by God for us to be able to grow. And there's almost never growth without suffering. In other words, when the Jews came into Mitzrayim to get away from the famine, they knew they were going down to Egypt 200 years ago. God told Abraham, your children will go down to Mitzrayim and they will be over there. They will pass through a time of suffering. Now, why would Hashem do that? It's like he's telling you, like it didn't matter what they did. It has nothing to do with you're good, you're not good, you give charity, you don't give. It doesn't matter. All that doesn't matter. What Hashem was saying is that as people, there was something that we needed to go through in order for growth to happen to us as people. And what was that growth? God wanted us to realize what kind of existence a slave has, so that when we have slaves, we will not treat that. When I say slaves, I mean maids, I mean house workers, I mean housekeepers, I mean people who we employ, right? What it's like to be dependent, on someone else for your livelihood, for your food, for your salary. That's one. He wanted us to realize what it's like to be a foreign person in a foreign land, because when we are going to come to Israel, there will be foreign people in our land. How do we treat them? How do we treat a person who is who's an orphan, who's a widow? It's like he brought us to the suffering to be in the lowest level of society in order to help us grow, so that when we are going to be in a much better situation, we will be able to treat other people with that kind of kindness, respect, consideration, all of the above. In other words, God looked at us and he said, if I want people to rise to a level of sensitivity, to rise up, to just rise up, I'm going to give them suffering, and through the suffering, they're going to grow. So like suffering that comes in my path, it's not a glitch in the system. It is the system. Okay. Like, so it's as if we have spiritual levels that we need to rise to. We have an opportunity to rise to different occasions, right? And the suffering is here in order for us to rise to the occasion. In other words, we need to ask about suffering. We need to ask not why is it happening to me, but for what is this happening to me? So the difficulties are built into the path of our lives, and the difficulties that we have, they're tailor-made for me. Each and every one of us, we have our tailor-made difficulties, challenges. They're tailor-made for us for the sole purpose of not running away from it, but facing it. In other words, if we don't learn from our suffering, that's when we really stay within our suffering. When we decide to stay in the lower level and not deal with the suffering and just ask, why is this happening to me? And why did this happen? And how is this happening? And how could God let it? That is the prison of the suffering. The asking of why is this happening? How did this happening to me? But if we ask, for what did this happen to me? What is this here? Just as the Jews were in Egypt, what is this here to teach us? If we're able to ask for what, that point is when we leave the suffering, and that's the point where we're in totally a mode of growth. So okay, so that's one aspect. Now, and I want to give like two examples that just was in last, like a couple of weeks parasha, and this week's parasha. We had Yosef, and he had dreams, and he wanted to be king, and he told his brothers, he told his brothers, these are the dreams I had, and they inferred from it, and they thought to themselves, you think you're going to be king? We are going to make sure that not only are you not going to be king, you're going to be the opposite of what any king would ever be, and that is a slave. And they planned to sell him as a slave. Now, what Hashem was saying is, so it turns out that exactly their selling him to slavery is what made him into king, right? What they did, the hishtadlut they did, or the effort they did to knock him down, actually was created the very thing that they didn't want to happen. So God has plans for us. And as much as we try to see the blows that are coming and just try to defend us, and like, how could I get out of the suffering, right? How could we get out of this route, or how could we just like pull out of the game? So Hashem wants to put us, the route that Hashem is putting us is the one that he has planned for us. In other words, any difficulties we have is a difficulty that was planned for us. This was planned for Yosef. Also, Paro, when he saw that his plan wasn't working, he said every boy needs to be thrown into the Nile. And at the end of the day, we have the story of Moshe, who Paro actually in his own house raised the leader of the Jewish people. It's like a message to us that Hashem has the route planned out. And the route that he planned out is a route that we need to embrace. And by embracing it and seeing how we can grow from there is the way that our path was made for us to get to higher levels of existence, to more evolved levels of existence. So now, if we have in us God's wisdom, we have in us God's wisdom. What gives us God's wisdom is the difficulties and challenges in our lives. So many people would say, if XYZ didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be the person of growth that I am today. Because unfortunately, it is suffering that makes us grow. It is challenges that make us grow. And it has an ability to give us God's wisdom within us, right? To know. And God's wisdom is the knowledge that our difficulty is custom made for us and my path, and I will cross it and I will grow from it, and I will have a more mature existence in this world. Now, at the minute we have difficulties, Hashem wants us to grow as women of influence. He wants us to expand our wisdom, to expand ourselves. And our attitudes to difficulties isn't, let's survive it and pass it somehow. Let's somehow survive it and pass it. The suffering is not to stay the same way that we were. The suffering is to raise our neshama. It's as if our neshama might be in kindergarten or in first grade, and it is to take our soul and to evolve it into a higher age. Because we can't stay in first grade forever. Our neshama cannot stay in first grade forever. And the way we handle our difficulties is the way we handle wanting to run a marathon. We run a marathon, we want to develop our muscles, we want them to expand, we want them to burst out of their casing, and make us stronger. And then we're able to look at this 10-mile marathon and actually being able to run it. Like, I love seeing all these inspirational stories of obese women who ended up starting to walk around the block, and then, they walked around 2 blocks, and then a year later, you see them running a marathon because they started eating healthier, and the path grew and grew, and they started running, and they did it slowly. They developed themselves slowly, and they evolved themselves. This was in the physical sense. So what I'm saying is, running a marathon is being able to deal with the challenges and continue on to realize that this is our marathon to evolve our soul. Okay. There's something else that happened in the Chumash, this week's parasha, that I really, really loved. And I just heard it from Rabbi Itamar Eldar. And this is what's going to bring us to the fact that what we see, that reality doesn't exist in this world, that we create our reality. Reality does not exist. So the name of the Chumash is Shmot. It's called names. And when we start, so of course they give us the names of all the people, Reuven, Shimon, Yaakov, everyone that came to Egypt. There were 70 of them, and the names are, and they're saying all the names. The second chapter that starts we start a chapter and there's no names in the chapter. It starts that a son of Levi took a daughter of Levi, and they had 2 other children. And the mother, we don't have the name of the mother, had a son. She never names him. She saw him. She said he was great. She saw that he was good, which is, by the way, the rabbis say that Moshe's mother called him Tuvia because she saw that he was Tov. But in the Tanakh, it doesn't say his name. And then she puts him in a small ark, in a small like bassinet, and his sister watches. We don't have the sister's name. And then the daughter of Paro comes, and the daughter of Paro, hears him crying. She takes him out of the water and she decides to raise him as her own. And then the sister approaches her and tells her, I could find you a woman that will nurse him for you. And she does. She brings the child's mother, which no names is mentioned. It's all the daughter of, the sister of, the mother of, the son of. There's no names here. And the first name in this chapter that's mentioned after a couple of Pesukim is actually the name Moshe. Moshe is the first name that we get within this chapter of a whole parasha that's called names. So there are no names. Now, this is Rav Itamar Eldar. He says that when the daughter of Paro hears the crying, she sends out her arm or her maidservant, one or the other, and I'm not going to get into that, but she opens it up and she sees a child crying and she has compassion and she sees that he's from the Jews. Okay, so first of all, she's able to hear a cry, and that's a fact. That's reality. Reality is a fact. The fact is she heard a cry, and then she had compassion. And then she saw that he was from the Jews. Now, let's say now him being Jewish is like an ideology. It's her giving him a name already. It's naming him. He's not a human being, he's a Jew. Many times in our history, our enemies saw us as Jews and we cried and no one had compassion for us because first we were seen as Jews. The daughter of Paro didn't see a Jewish boy crying. She saw a baby crying. And when she saw the baby crying, that's when her compassion came up. And that is when she was able to say, even though he's from the Jews, I'm taking him, because she allowed her compassion to come within him. Now, what is this whole thing? And what ended up happening is his name was Moshe, was both a compassionate name and an ideological name. The name Moshe was given for the 2 mothers. Moshe is first in Hebrew because I took him out of the water. It means Minamai Meshitiu, I took him out of the water. And the name Moshe in ancient Egyptian, means my son. So Moshe was called for his 2 mothers. One, the mother that understood, he was taken out of the water, the mother that gave him the ability to live and survive because she put him in the water. And the other one that had compassion for him in seeing that he's a little boy crying and didn't immediately say, oh, he's Jewish, out he goes. And he was named for his 2 mothers, the ideological mother and the compassionate mother. Now, her ability to listen to the crying before she gives any kind of name generates her compassion. And I want to talk about not giving names. I want to go within the line of this parasha for us not to give names anymore in our lives. And when we don't give names, we have an ability to have compassion for all the people around us. When I say all the people around us, I mean our spouses, I mean our friends, our parents, our children, even if our parents have passed away. Not giving names, and I'm going to say exactly what I mean by not giving names. So I want to tell a story about an avodah I did with my friend a couple of months ago. Her name is Gila. She's 55 years old. And 55, like every 5 birthday, 50, 55, 60, 65. For Gila, it was like a big deal. And she had, my friend Gila had a difficult year where some medical issues came up for her and she was very much being challenged, and she wanted to celebrate her birthday. And she told her husband, like, honey, I want you to, take me out, and I want to celebrate my birthday with going to like a very fancy place that they're not used to going. They hardly ever go out. And I really want to make it as a statement, not even with the children. I just want it to be with me and you spending time together. So she told her husband, my birthday falls out on Tuesday. And it turns out that her husband every Tuesday has a poker game with his friends. And he told her, you know what? Let's go out on Wednesday so that I could have, I want to have my poker game. I don't want to miss my poker game. I have it with my friends. I don't want to miss it. And he wanted to celebrate it the next day, and then started a whole session of giving names. So what are the facts? The facts is her birthday is on Tuesday. Her husband's poker game is Tuesday, and her husband wanted to celebrate the birthday on Wednesday. These are the facts. She started giving it names. He is selfish. He doesn't see me. He doesn't care about me. He can't make time for me. All these are names. All these are names. And the more we give names for what we see, his friends only count. He puts his friends first. I am last on his list. And the names went on and on. So this is what I call, there's no reality in this world. This was not the reality. The reality was her birthday is on Tuesday and the poker game was on Tuesday and he wanted to celebrate on Wednesday, right? The more we have names for what we see, the less compassion we have for the people standing across from us. We need to talk about the facts and not give it interpretations or name. My birthday is today. I want to celebrate today. My husband has a poker game and he wants to celebrate tomorrow. Okay. Now, before we go into the avodah that I did with her, I want to say something about birthdays. And I think it's like a fertile ground for a lot of fights that we have. So first of all, our birthday is a time, the day that we were born is a time where our light came into this world. Our birthday is actually a time, a place and time, or a time and place where God said, this world cannot exist 1 minute longer without this child being born. And why are we born into this world? We're born into this world in order to shine our lights, in order to bring our light forth in this world. Bringing our light forth in this world is bringing our good forth into this world. So at this point in time, our light, which is why in Israel, a lot of names that were given in the past 30 years have to do with light. Like my son-in-law is Or, and there's Natan Or in my family, and a lot of Oriya, and many names in the Hebrew language have to do with light, with Or, because also they say when Moshe was born, the house was filled with light. Literally, every baby that's born fills the house with light. So our birthday is the time where our light came into this world. Now, when we have a birthday, I hate what happens. I could say I very much disagree with what happens in Western society of what happens in birthdays, because it's like as if everyone on the outside needs to celebrate the fact that we were born. But the truth is, on our birthdays, we need to maybe get close family or close friends together and give some of our light in this gathering. Like in Chabad, which is something I've spoken about, they say that on a person's birthday, they get together with their friends and they tell their friends what they would like to take on upon themselves in the coming year, right? What kind of light do I want to give this world in the coming year? And they want to talk about the light that they decided last year to give. What happened with that? How did it go? How did it work? What did you find yourself? So like, I have friends that on their birthdays decide that, once every other week, they'll go to the old age home. Once every other, once a week, they will sit down and help someone do their homework. Any way, everyone has different light that they bring into the world. So birthdays is an opportunity. I love the fact also, I don't remember birthdays very well. Intuitively, I had this attitude about birthdays throughout my whole life. And thank God I was born on a fast day. So there was never, an opportunity even to have a hullabaloo because it was a fast day. But something that I really enjoyed, my son Shlomo, when it was his birthday, he called me up to wish me Mazal Tov. He said, Ima, this is really your birthday. This is the year that I was born. It was your birthday. It was the day you gave birth to me. So every single day that our children were born, those are our birthdays where we can celebrate our children's birthday. But when it comes to our own birthday, this is like really as an aside of the avodah that I did with Gila on her birthday, which is the kind of head frame we need to be in when it's our birthday. We want to take charge of our own birthdays, see how our light could be given, reflect on what we were brought into this world for. And sometimes I think that the noise that's being made on birthdays is a desire for us to forget that our birthday is actually another step closer to our death day, and that we need to actually sit down and calculate, where are we heading, where we want to go to, are we happy with the way we're going, are we making the most of our lives, what kind of, I was born in here to bring my light forth, can I bring more light forth, am I bringing enough of that light forth, am I being wasted, am I am I taking advantage of the days and the minutes and the years that are given to us as gifts? And that is what a birthday is about. So now, so first of all, when I spoke to Gila, I was having a feeling, and I also brought it up with her, that it was like she was as if trying to battle with her husband and try to have him prove, how much do you love me? Are you going to give up your poker game, or are you going to celebrate with me? It was like a battle for him to prove himself, for him to have to give up something that he really wants to, in order for her to make sure that she's important. Now, we need to do that in order. We need to relinquish that, because we need to realize that if we want acknowledgement, we need to acknowledge ourselves. If we want to have someone else show us that we love us, we first need to show ourselves that we love ourselves. All the things that we're trying to get from people outside of us, we need to first do it to ourselves. We can't go and request, have a desire that someone will prove to us anything about ourselves. The only one who could prove anything to us about ourselves is ourselves. It's between me and Hashem, right? It's between me and Hashem. And also, why would we want to be in a situation where my husband really wants to be at his poker game, and he's sitting with me at my birthday? He's not there then. His head is not there. So he might be proving something, but why would I want someone who doesn't want to be there to be there? It's not a place that I want to be at. So first we need to figure out is like, where is that coming from? The second thing, which is what I want to say, the way we, not calling names, or the way we define it, is the kind of reality we have in our lives. I asked her, like, what is your husband trying to say when he says, let's push off your birthday for Wednesday and I'm going to go to my poker game on Tuesday? What is he trying to say? And I want you to look at it with compassion, because I want you to take down the names of, he's selfish, he doesn't care, I'm not important, all those names. I want you to give it a positive twist. A positive twist. What could it mean that he's saying? So she's like, I don't know. We ended up coming with something. We ended up saying that her husband, and this is her husband's Torah, by the way, what her husband is really trying to say is, I believe that in this life, we could have everything. I could have your celebration, and I could have my poker game, and I could, like, in this life, I can dance at all the weddings. I am able to dance at all the weddings. And that's what I want to do in this life. This is how I want to live life. I want to grab it all and dance at everything. That's how we push the birthday. Okay, so it's a day later. There's no big deal. Like, we could still grab everything life has to give us and enjoy it to the fullest. Now, this way of looking at her husband immediately creates, now I want to tell you, there are a million things that I could have come up with in terms of what it meant that her husband was saying, let's celebrate the next day, not Tuesday, let's celebrate Wednesday. It can also be that her husband is saying, every day of my life with you is a celebration. So I only have the poker game once a week, but celebrating your life, we're together in it every single day. It's a celebration. Not that we're partying every single day, but I wake up every morning and I realize that I'm lucky. That is a celebration. That I'm happy you're with me. That's a celebration. It's not the 2 hours that we get in a restaurant and shovel down food. That's not what it is. It's the realization that I'm lucky to be married to. That could be one thing. I want you guys to think about, what is her husband trying to say? What is Gila's husband trying to say when he says, I want to go to my poker game? There are other much more compassionate names to give it. Guys, anyone has an idea? Okay. No one? You could just unmute yourself and say, where do you think? Okay, so once I did this avodah with Gila, she realized that when she had all these names that she gave her husband, selfish, doesn't care, on the list, whatever, she created a reality in her head that made her live in a very constricted, tortured reality. She created her own suffering. Hashem brought us into this world and he gave us, bye. Lock the door, hun. Thanks. He gave us our challenges, and I refuse to call them suffering, because the challenges that he gave us are tools for us to grow. But what Gila was doing, she was bringing suffering and torture on herself. She was seeing her husband as a person who's not generous and not loving and not all the not, all those names. And that's what she was feeding herself. And that was the reality she had in her head. And there is absolutely no way that you could walk around this world in a happy, uplifted way if that's the reality she created for herself in her head. So what I'm saying is that the way we decide to look at different things, at different occurrences, at different people and what they do in this world, particularly people, and the way we decide to interpret it and the names we decide to give it will decide if we are living in a reality that serves us, that gives us happy thoughts, that enriches us, that enlivens us, that creates, that uplifts us, that we are walking in this world like we're truly in the Garden of Eden. We're not in a jungle of dog eat dog and man eat man. We're not in a jungle where, and next week, my class is going to be how we create our jungle in this world, but really how we could get out of the jungle that this world is in. It's next week, the class is going to be getting out of the jungle. We're going to be getting out of the jungle, but creating a reality for ourselves that brings us down. We create a jungle for ourselves. And then being in a jungle makes us like constantly be in fight or flight, doing things that like, this is loss, this is gain, I lost, I gained, and all these cheshbonot and calculations that bring us nowhere. There is, it brings us, like being in the jungle is a place where there's a lot of breaking down of people's gate, like there's no boundaries, and we end up criticizing a lot because we go into people's boundaries and people come into our boundaries, but that's going to be for next week. There's another story that I wanted to give in terms of what names do to us, and doing away with the names that allow the compassion for other people in our lives to grow. Now, first of all, why is it important for us to be compassionate? Because that we're put in this world to emulate Hashem. We're put in this world with a part of Hashem in us. all of us together make the greater whole of God. Part of God is in us. Our soul is God-given, is from God. Now, when we are compassionate towards the people around us, we behave in a godly way. In other words, we are here to emulate God. And it's like living up to our fullest potential when we're able to have compassion to the people around us, to the situation around us. So it says, God is compassionate. You should be compassionate. He's forgiving. We need to be forgiving. Hashem has all these 13 attributes that he shows Moshe of who he is. And that is what we need to emulate and live on a day-to-day basis. Create an atmosphere of compassion, which, by the way, if we go back to Moshe and both of his mother that had compassion for him, one refused to throw him, but put him in and, was willing to give him up in order for him to survive. One mother was willing to give him up so that he will have a chance at life. And the other mother was willing to brave her father's wrath and law and edict so this child should live. That compassion that both mothers had for him created the most compassionate person in Jewish history. He went and he took us for 40 years through the desert at his own expense, at his family's expense. He was our shepherd. And what a shepherd has is compassion for his sheep, looking out for them. He went and he saw his brothers and he tried to stop the Egyptian hitting him. He saw the two Jews. He tried to stop them from fighting. He went and he saw the shepherds and he tried to save the daughters of Yitro from the shepherd. Like, his life was one after the other. His stories are written with compassion. That's who he was, because that's what happened towards him by his two mothers. I guess that was the DNA that was passed on through the daughter of Paro and through his mother. Now, when we have compassion for the people around us, we create a compassionate reality. We create it. The reality doesn't exist, but the reality that we create in this world. And I want to give one more story in order to like bring it home. And then if anyone has questions, I'd love to hear. There were four sisters, who one of the older sister's son, he was the first one to get married, and one of the sisters did a Shabbat, and not one of the sisters, this oldest daughter did a Shabbat Chatan, a Shabbat Sheva Berachot, and it was the first one in the family that was being hosted, and the three sisters came with their families. It was like 50 people kind of Sheva Berachot, and I'm friendly with the three sisters. I'm friendly with actually the four sisters. I know four of them, and I'm friendly with two. So I asked each one of them, how was the Shabbat Berachot? How was it? How was the Shabbat? Because in Israel, when you have a Shabbat Berachot, it's like your family that lives all over the country. No one lives down the block from one another. It's an opportunity for everyone to get together. So I was speaking to each one of my friends, and one of my friends goes, "Oh my God, it was like the worst event I ever went through. The food was nauseous, and it was, the everything was on paper plates, and it wasn't ecological, and I was hungry the whole Shabbat, and there was nothing to eat, and it was just like one of the worst events I went to." So I was listening to that. It's like, oh my God, that sounds brutal. And then I was speaking to the other sister, who's my other friend, and I asked, how was the Shabbat Berachot? She goes, oh my God, it was amazing. We all got together. I'm telling you, the food was so delicious. I finished it, and there wasn't even more. Like, everything was finished, and every salad and the desserts she got from this and that bakery, and I just felt pampered the whole weekend. Now, they were both describing the very same event. They were all there. And the reality that they chose to see was their experience. In other words, there's really no reality in this world but the reality that we create in our own heads. And that reality is the reality that's going to rule our lives. If in your reality, your husband doesn't care, and your husband doesn't care, and he puts his friends first, and he doesn't love you, and he's selfish, and he doesn't want to step, That's the reality you're going to have in your life. And if you decide to tell yourself, my husband wants to dance at all the weddings and wants to just grab life and take everything that he can and live life to the fullest, that's the kind of husband you're going to have. So our reality is created in our heads. We create the kind of life we have day to day, the kind of children we have, the kind of spouses we have, the kind of friends we have. And so what I'm saying is, going back to the start of Sefer Shmot, where the names were not mentioned and compassion was brought forth, I want us to stop calling events around our lives names that bring us down, that diminish us, that diminish the people around us, that make us depressed. And I want you to create a reality in your life that will just bring you up. It reminded me also of the story with the whole Shabbat Berachot, that I made a Shabbat Chatan and my brother made Shabbat. We both did a Shabbat Berachot. And now I made it with it was ecological, and we didn't have paper plates, and I bought a great catering, and I made the best kind of event that I could make. And now my brother's wife, who's a working woman, she had paper plates, and she got a very inexpensive catering, and it was a very different event from mine. So I asked my father, how did you like the Shabbat Chatan? I loved it. It was amazing. It was great. It was this, it was that. Now, when I asked him, how did you like mine? He gave me the same exact response. My father responded to my event and my brother's event in the very same way, with love and enthusiasm. And how could he do that? How could my father do that? The two events were so different. Also, my brother's event, the men and women sat separately, you couldn't sit near your spouse. The sewer system ran over because we were in a yeshiva high school, because it was inexpensive there. So, and the physical accommodations were from the plaza to a boys' high school. Mine wasn't in the plaza, but as if, right? And my father was like, it was great, it was amazing. Now, how could my father say that? How could he say that? Because for my father, the being together and the families making a simcha, that it's not about the food that we ate, and it's not about the surroundings. All of that is just superficial. It's on the surface. But deep down, what my father is saying, what is important about this is the fact that we're able to get together, is the fact that we could spend a Shabbat together, is the fact that we could laugh and talk together. The family being together, that's what it is for him. It's nothing on the surface, which is why my father creates very positive realities around everything around him. Is always, his reality is an amazing reality. It's a positive reality. Every word I say creates in my heart a feeling. Every word I say, I walk around with feeling and meaning. And every word I say means I decide what path I choose to walk. And we have two paths to walk. We have a path of Avraham Avinu, and we have a path of Bil'am. Bil'am was the prophet that wanted to curse Bnei Israel. He wanted to bring them down. He wanted Bnei Israel, he wanted to create a reality of names that will bring Am Yisrael down. And then there's Avraham Avinu, who was our forefathers. And in Pirkei Avot, there's a saying. It says, anyone that has these three attributes these three, I'm not going to call it attributes, these three things.
Traits.
What? Traits.
Is it
Thank
traits?
you. Every person that has these three traits are from the students of Avraham Avinu, and anyone that has the three other traits are from the students of Bil'am, who tried to curse Bnei Israel. So what does Avraham Avinu have? He has an Ayin Tova. Ayin Tova means the ability to interpret everything for the good. Everything for the good. He's like my father. he didn't see the sewer coming up and the food that was lousy and the paper plates that were decrepit and melted when we put soup in it. He didn't see that. Ruach nemucha means to be able to be humble, to look at things in a humble way. And nefesh shefela, it also means to nefesh shefela means to know that you're not on top of the world. Like you are not the God that is judging. Like the nefesh shefela is the ability to be non-judgmental. So these are the students of Avraham Avinu. And the students of Bil'am are the opposite, like a bad eye, looking at Am Yisrael and wanting to curse them and wanting to just translate anything that they do into badness. Ruach Gevoha means like looking as if he's the one that's running the world and that he has judgment on everything, right? And these are the differences between the students of Avraham and the students of Bil'am. But the rabbis also tell us something else. The rabbis say that the students of Avraham, they are able to have a good life in this world and a good life in the world to come. In other words, the ability to create your reality to your specifications gives you a good life in this world, and then you have a good life in the afterlife. You're able to have an afterlife. However, the children of Bil'am, they create a hell for themselves in this world, and they have hell in the world to come as well. Because what we create for ourselves in this world is what we're going to have in the next world. So like giving the names of he doesn't care and he's selfish and he just thinks about himself and et cetera, like all these words, they actually give us hell in this world. Because my friend Gila was walking around in a living hell. This is my husband, this is who I'm married to, this is who I live with, et cetera, et cetera. And if she could have walked around with the thought of my husband just wants to swallow life with two hands, she would have been walking in Gan Eden in this world, right? So when I say good words, they go into my heart and I have a good feelings is like a very lame kind of statement. Someone help me out. Like if I go around when I say good words and I go with that in my heart, I walk around with a good what? Good attitude, with good countenance, with the ability to bring my light forth in this world, right? If I choose to walk
good
around
vibe, good vibe.
What?
Good vibe. Huh? Good vibe, like a good
vibe. Yeah. If I choose to walk around with negative was like stingy, horrible, small, disgusting, stupid, like all these words that I would say, I create an environment in me that's hard, that's tormented, that's negative. And I want to create the reality around me. It's in my hands to create it. And I want to live in a world where I can love and trust and believe. That's what I want. I want to live in that kind of environment. And once I live and I generate this kind of trust and love and believe, it's going to generate, that's what's going to be generated around me, right? I love, if I want love, I should be loved. I should act in a loving way. If I want love from people around me, I should be acting in a loving way, in a compassionate way. And that will magnetize people around me. Now, it makes me realize that I actually can color for myself the kind of world that I want to live in. I create the kind of world that I want to live in. And I can say that because I lived with my two parents who both had the same exact life. They had the same children, the same experiences happened to them. You know, they both lost their money, like both my parents. My father chose to look at it. My father chose to interpret his reality in a very optimistic way, and my mother chose in a very pessimistic way. And that's why in this world, my father lived in Gan Eden and my mother lived very opposite of Gan Eden. So now I want to go back to the suffering that really is not suffering, of what I spoke about at the beginning of the class. We have challenges in our lives, and we can choose to name it suffering, or we could choose to name it growth and opportunities. And according to the reality that we will create and the names we choose to call it, according to that will be how our life will look like. And I want to just end with the fact that Hashem put us here for us to be in Gan Eden. He didn't put us here to be in hell. That wasn't God's intention. We read about the creation of the world and where Hashem put us. That was his original intent. His original intent is for us to be in Gan Eden. And by us refusing a negative reality is us helping God put us back in the Gan Eden that we thought we lost. And I would love to hear from you now, like any comments or questions about what we just learned.
So what do you say, like, to this point that you're saying, which is really resonates, and it's unbelievable that it's we reflect and look at the things that come upon us is we create our own reality. I hear you, but there are just so many people that would say to that, but that's so naive, or that's so, setting yourself up maybe for not reality. Like.
But we just said we're creating our reality. There's no reality.
Hear you.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no reality out there. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Can I give another example?
Please.
Okay, I want to give another example. My friend came over and said, my husband left me. He left the house. He doesn't want to be with me. He wants to get divorced. Right? Okay. The husband left. It's a reality. What does it mean he left the house? He left the walls of the house. She could choose to look at it as my husband left me, or she could choose to look at it as my husband needs time for himself. My husband needs to separate a little and create space. My husband needs to rethink things. In other words, we take it to ourselves, or she took it to ourselves. He left me, he doesn't like me, he wants to get rid of me, he can't stand me. The husband leaving has nothing to do with me. It all has to do with my husband that needs space, that needs time, that has his needs that he's trying to take care of. Now, I can create two types of reality for myself. One, to be the Nebi, hard-bitten wife that her husband left her and she is all alone and needs to deal with life by herself with all her children. Or she could be the person of her husband needed to figure things out for himself. And he did leave because he needed more space, because he needed more time, because he needed more energy. He needed whatever it is that he needed. I don't know what he needed. It has nothing to do with her. And her reality now is how day to day, taking care of her children and managing and living a good life, and living a life that you don't wait, there's a word. You don't label it as I was left, I'm a Hazit case, poor me, life stinks, suffering hard, like all of that create a living hell in your life. But it's more of choosing a reality that makes you upbeat in life, that creates a more upbeat atmosphere around you. I don't call it naive at all, because I believe that the universe, God, will replicate and recreate the reality that we create. That will be replicated in our lives. How is it that my mother is the most miserable of people and my father is the most happy of people? They both have the same facts in their life. They both have 5 children and 40 grandchildren, and everyone is healthy. And my father's been sick a million times. Like, 10 heart operations and whatever, my mother nothing. And my father is by far, because my father created a very full and happy reality for himself. He chose to do that. Oh. Wow, by the way, I didn't wear my pods today. I hope
We heard you perfectly.
I heard it good. Okay, loud and clear. Okay, I didn't even realize. Thanks, Rini. Thanks to you, I didn't wear it. Okay, do you understand that?
Yes, it's very clear.
Like, okay, you know what? I want to give you another great example from my life. I want to give you a great example from my life. Adele, this is for you. So, I don't think she's on though, but she'll listen to the recording. So when I raised my children, we believed in the family bed, right? The kids slept with us, and it was really great memories. So David has very good memories of the family bed. Now Adele grew in a house where the family bed didn't exist. Like, she could have gone to her parents, but she wasn't going to sleep a full night in their beds. Everyone had their own beds. And Adele believes very strongly that the husband-wife unit needs to be a strong unit, and the children need to be in their own beds. So David came into this marriage thinking, I have such great memories of sleeping with my kids in bed. I'm going to sleep in the bed. Adele is like, I really want the husband-wife unit to be very strong. Children need to sleep in their own beds. Now, this I know for a fact, that I can look at this reality and say, Adele is deciding everything in this, and it's her say, and she is controlling my son, and she is, I could say a million things about Adele, right? And think that is reality, and then feel so crappy about it. And I could look at Adele and say, the most important thing in her life is her relationship with my son, and she will do everything to make that relationship strong and bonded, because knowing that a very strong and bonded relationship with a husband creates healthy and strong families, and how lucky I am that she married my son. Okay. And the reason I can tell you that I have a chance to choose both those realities is because I have a friend whose daughter wants to have the family bed, the husband doesn't want, and she looks at the husband like a piece of garbage. Like, how could she? And she doesn't care, and she doesn't want, and no, like, he doesn't care, he doesn't want, and she creates that kind of reality of strife and fight, and just a lousy feeling within her when she deals with that situation, with the same exact situation that I'm dealing. And I choose to create my reality in the way that I choose to create it. It's in my hands. The reality that we have is one that we created. It's not one. What Hashem put in here are the facts. The facts, right? What is the fact? The fact is, David would want to sleep with the baby, and Adele does not. That's the fact. Now, everything else are the names that I'm going to give it, and my life will go to the Garden of Eden or to hell according to the names that I give it. We had a woman in the Michal class that many years ago, her husband committed suicide, and she ended up remarrying, and she had a son, and she had another son together with the new husband after she had 3-4 children with the previous one that committed suicide. And she says she walks around scared the whole time. How could she not walk around being scared all the time? And it turns out that after she did avodah, is the thoughts that she thinks are making her scared. And that's why she walks around in a perpetual, like, having panic attacks. It's the thoughts that we have that create our lousy feeling. It's not the lousy feeling creating the thoughts. So when we create our thoughts, we create our reality.
Right. True.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions, any comments? I have another example of something that's happening in Israel, right? Hold on one second. I have another example of what's happening in Israel. Like in the Israeli political situation, there was a man that his name is Bennett, and he had only six. He had six. How do you say votes? Not six. Like in the Israeli parliament, you have 120 members of the Knesset. He had 6 members of Knesset, 7 total with him, and he became the prime minister. Now, people chose to say many things about him. Some people said, wow, he wants to become prime minister, and with 6 members of the Knesset, he became prime minister. And some people will say he stole the elections, and other people will say, he steamrolled over democracy. It's like, you know what? There's always a child that says, you didn't give me, it's not fair, I'm not first, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. This child creates a reality of not fairness in his head. Just like the woman who the mother gave her last, and she saw herself always as the last. That, like, there's so many people that we know that walk around in this world thinking it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And that's the reality they create around themselves. They create victimized realities. So do we in our everyday, and I don't want to take it now to the national level, and I don't want to even take it to the community level. I want to take it to our own personal level in our day-to-day lives, not to give the name, to be able to generate more compassion and to create a reality that we would love to live in, that we would love to live, and reality will be that way. It will be that way. Okay. If anyone has any question, any avodah that they want to do, I could, I'm going to turn off the recording right now.